The cicadas buzzed relentlessly, their song blending with the dry rustle of leaves as Ethan stood there, the faded gingham dress clinging to his skin like a secret he couldn't shake. The heat was a living thing, pressing against him, but the shiver that ran through him had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the dress, the way its soft, worn cotton brushed his shoulders, the way it tightened around his waist when he fastened the buttons. For a fleeting moment, he wasn't Ethan anymore. He was Emily, delicate and free, her short legs peeking out from under the hem, her reflection in his mind's eye almost beautiful despite the ugly, scuffed shoes. The delta stretched out before him, vast and empty, a stage for his solitary performance. But reality always crept back, sharp and unyielding. He folded the dress carefully, hiding it beneath a rock where no one would find it, and trudged back toward the ramshackle cabin, the weight of his secret heavier than the summer sun. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and dust. Harry, his grandfather, sat in his worn armchair, his white mane glowing like moonlight against the dim interior. His deep blue eyes, crinkled at the corners with wisdom and time, followed Ethan without a word. Harry was a rock, steadfast and silent, the only family Ethan had left after the accident. The river had taken his mother and sister in a cruel twist of fate, a freighter colliding with their boat, swallowing their laughter in its dark waters. His father had lingered for a week, fighting for breath before succumbing, leaving Ethan in Harry's care. The cabin, with its sagging roof and peeling walls, was their sanctuary, a place where time seemed to stand still. But Harry saw more than Ethan wanted to admit. There was a knowing in his gaze, a flicker of understanding that made Ethan's chest tighten. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the porch, Harry stepped outside, his movements slow but deliberate. Ethan watched from the window, his heart pounding. Harry joined Marcus, his oldest friend, on the creaky porch steps. Marcus, tall and lean, with white hair and deep brown eyes that held a quiet intensity, was a fixture in their lives. His hands, long and bony, moved with grace as he set up the checkerboard. The two men, bound by decades of shared history, spoke in low tones, their voices a soft murmur against the evening stillness. "You notice it too, don't you?" Harry said, his voice rough but warm, like gravel underfoot. Marcus nodded, his smile gentle but knowing. "He's searching, Harry. Same way I saw you search way back when." Harry chuckled, a sound like dry leaves skittering across the ground. "Thought I hit it better, but Ethan, he's got that same fire. That dress I found out by the Delta, he's not just playing." Marcus leaned back, his eyes glinting under the porch light. "Linda's been watching him too. She says he's ready, but he don't know it yet. Maybe it's time we give him a push." Harry's gaze drifted to the window where Ethan lingered, unseen. "Maybe, but it's a hard road. You know what folks out here can be like." "Folks don't matter," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "What matters is he finds himself. Linda and I will make sure of it." Inside, Ethan felt the weight of their words, even if he couldn't hear them. He retreated to his room, the walls closing in around him, the memory of the dress's touch still lingering on his skin. He lay awake that night, the heat pressing down, dreaming of soft fabrics and the freedom they promised. In his dreams, he was Emily again, standing under a sky ablaze with stars, the air cool against his newly smooth skin, the scent of wildflowers mingling with something richer, more intoxicating, a perfume he couldn't name but craved. The next morning, Linda arrived, her presence a warm breeze cutting through the stifling heat. She was Marcus's wife, a woman with a smile that could melt steel and eyes that saw straight through to your soul. She hugged Ethan tightly, her embrace maternal and fierce, and he felt the safety of it, the unspoken promise that she understood. "Come with me, honey," she said, her voice like velvet. "We've got somewhere to be." Ethan followed, his heart a drumbeat of anticipation and fear. They walked through the woods, the path familiar yet suddenly foreign, until they reached the road where a bus waited, its gray and purple paint peeling under the Oklahoma sun. Inside, the seats were worn, the air thick with the smell of diesel and old leather. Linda held his hand, her fingers strong and steady, and he felt the magnetic pull of her confidence, her certainty that whatever lay ahead was right. As the city skyline rose in the distance, Ethan's breath caught. Oklahoma City was a different world, Bright lights, honking horns, the pulse of life he'd only glimpsed in passing. Linda led him through the chaos, her grip firm, until they stopped at a small yellow house with white trim, its porch adorned with flowers that seemed to glow in the dusk. She knocked, and the door opened to reveal Alice a vision of elegance, her brown eyes sharp and inviting, her presence both commanding and soothing. "Ethan," Linda said, her voice steady. "This is Alice." Alice smiled, a curve of lips that held 1,000 secrets, and Ethan felt the room shift, the air charged with something electric. "I used to be Brad," she said, her voice low and melodic, "the youngest of Marcus and Linda's boys. Now I'm Alice, and you, Ethan, you're just like me." The words hung between them, a thread of connection so tangible it made Ethan's skin tingle. He wanted to run, to hide, but Alice's gaze held him, magnetic and unyielding, drawing him into a world where he could finally be seen. Her beauty was sophisticated, a blend of poise and mystery that made his pulse race. He imagined her touch, the way her fingers might trace the lines of his face, transforming him with the same grace she exuded. Linda squeezed his hand, her eyes soft but resolute. "She's here to help you, Ethan. To help you find the girl inside." And in that moment, as the city hummed outside and Alice's perfume, rich, floral, and forbidden, filled the air, Ethan knew his life was about to change. The dress wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was a promise, a seduction, a path to a self he'd only dared to dream of. He stepped forward, drawn to Alice like a moth to flame, ready to shed the skin of Ethan and embrace the fire of Emily. The porch creaked under their weight as Harry and Marcus settled into the evening, the checkerboard between them a familiar battlefield. The grass whispered softly with each step Ethan took away from the cabin, his figure disappearing into the twilight, the weight of his secret trailing behind him like a shadow. On the porch, the air was thick with the scent of pine and the faint tang of sweat from a long day under the Oklahoma sun. Harry's white mane caught the last light, glowing like a beacon, while Marcus's deep brown eyes, rich and reflective like a still lake, held a wisdom forged from years of struggle and survival. They'd grown up together in these parts, back when the scars of segregation still bled openly. But their friendship had endured, a quiet rebellion against a world that tried to divide them. Marcus moved a checker with a practiced hand, his long, bony fingers steady. "He's got that look, Harry," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of shared history. "Same as you did, way back when we were kids sneaking out to fish the river." Harry grunted, his blue eyes narrowing as he studied the board. "Thought I hit it better back then. But Ethan, he's different. Saw him out by the Delta again today in that dress. Not just playing dress-up, he's searching." The night deepened, crickets joining the chorus of the cicadas, their song a backdrop to the men's quiet conspiracy. Marcus leaned back, the porch swing creaking under his weight, his gaze drifting toward the house where Ethan had vanished. Linda's noticed too. She's been watching him close since the accident. Says he's carrying more than grief. There's something else in him, something he's afraid to name. Harry nodded, his toothless smile flickering like a candle in the dark. "He's got fire, that boy, but fire burns if you don't tend it right." He paused, his hand hovering over a checker. "You think Linda can reach him?" Marcus's lips curved, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "She's the only one who can. She's got a way of seeing what folks hide, even from themselves. If anyone can pull him out, it's her." There was a beat of silence, the kind that held years of trust and unspoken agreements. Then Harry spoke again, his voice softer now, almost tender. "You reckon we're doing right by him, pushing him toward whatever this is?" Marcus's hand settled on Harry's shoulder, a rare touch that spoke of brotherhood. "We're not pushing, Harry. We're guiding. He's got a path, same as you, same as me. Sometimes you gotta walk through the fire to find the light on the other side." Harry chuckled, a dry sound that carried both resignation and hope. "Might end up with a granddaughter instead of a grandson, you know." "Wouldn't be the worst thing," Marcus replied, his voice warm with conviction. "Linda and I, we've seen enough of the world to know people come in all shades, all shapes. If he's meant to be her, then that's what he'll be." Inside the cabin, Ethan paused by the window, his breath fogging the glass. He couldn't hear their words, but he felt their gazes, heavy with meaning. The dress he'd worn earlier haunted him, its touch a whisper against his skin, a promise of something forbidden yet intoxicating. He retreated to his room, the walls closing in, but the image of Emily lingered, her silhouette against the delta's endless sky, her hair catching the wind, her eyes alight with a freedom he craved. Back on the porch, Harry moved his checker, and Marcus captured it with a triumphant grin. "You're losing your touch, old man," Marcus teased, but his eyes were serious. "We'll talk to Linda tomorrow. She'll know what to do." Harry winked, a quick conspiratorial flash that sealed their pact. "Next move's hers. But mark my words, Marcus, we're about to see a change in this house, and it's gonna be beautiful." The night settled around them, the stars winking above, as the two men sat in silence, their hearts beating in sync with the rhythm of a secret they were ready to unveil. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, its cry echoing the longing Ethan felt, a melody of transformation waiting to be sung. The old gray and purple bus rumbled through the outskirts of Oklahoma City, its engine groaning like a beast reluctant to wake. The windows were smudged with the city's dust, but through them, Ethan caught glimpses of neon lights and towering buildings, a world so different from the endless plains of the Delta. Linda sat beside him, her hand warm and steady in his, her presence a lifeline against the swirl of nerves tightening his chest. The vinyl seat creaked under their weight, and the faint smell of diesel mixed with the perfume she wore a soft floral scent that reminded him of the wildflowers back home. Her voice cut through the hum of the engine, calm but firm. "We're going to see Alice," she said, her eyes meeting his with a depth that made his stomach flip. Ethan's heart skipped. Alice? He hadn't known Linda and Marcus had a daughter, only heard stories of their sons, Benjamin and Mike, and the lost one, Brad, who'd vanished into the city years ago. The name hung in the air, heavy with mystery, as the bus jolted over a pothole, sending a shiver up his spine. He gripped Linda's hand tighter, the city's noise, honking horns, distant sirens, the chatter of passengers closing in around him. It was overwhelming, this urban pulse, so unlike the quiet isolation of the cabin and the Delta's wide-open spaces. When the bus finally shuddered to a stop at the terminal, Linda led him out into the chaos of Oklahoma City's heart. The air was thick with the scent of asphalt and fast food, the lights casting a harsh glow on the sidewalks. He stumbled slightly, but Linda's grip was unyielding, guiding him through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path before. 4 blocks later, they turned onto a quieter street, lined with small houses painted in soft pastels. They stopped at a yellow house with white trim, its porch adorned with potted plants that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Linda knocked, and the door swung open almost immediately. There she was, Alice. She stood in the threshold, a vision of elegance that stole Ethan's breath. Her brown eyes, deep and knowing, held a spark of mystery that drew him in like a moth to flame. Her hair was styled in loose waves, framing a face that radiated confidence and poise, her skin glowing under the warm porch light. She wore a tailored blouse and skirt, the fabric hugging her curves with a sophistication that made Ethan's pulse quicken. There was a magnetism to her, a subtle allure that whispered of secrets and transformations, and he felt it in his bones, a pull he couldn't resist. Linda stepped aside, and Alice's gaze locked onto Ethan, steady and piercing. "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth as silk, carrying a hint of laughter and sadness intertwined. "I used to be Brad. Now I'm Alice. You're just like me. Linda brought you here so I could help you find the girl inside." The words hit him like a wave, crashing over the walls he'd built around his secret. His throat tightened, fear and excitement warring within him. She knew. Alice knew about the dress, about the moments out by the Delta when he became Emily, about the dreams that haunted him at night. And if she knew, then Harry and Marcus and Linda, they all knew. The realization was a double-edged sword, slicing through his defenses yet offering a strange relief. His hands trembled, but Alice's smile was warm, inviting, her eyes promising understanding rather than judgment. The air between them crackled with tension, a charged silence that spoke of shared struggles and unspoken hopes. Ethan took a step closer, drawn by the scent of her perfume, rich, sophisticated, with notes of jasmine and something darker, more seductive. He imagined her touch, the way her fingers might guide him through this new world, her voice a beacon in the storm of his doubts. Linda watched, her expression soft but resolute, as if she'd known all along that this moment would come. Alice extended a hand, her nails painted a deep red that matched the lipstick curving her lips. "Come inside," she said, her voice a velvet invitation. "We have a lot to talk about." Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest, but the magnetism of her presence was too strong to resist. He stepped forward, crossing the threshold into a world where his deepest desire might finally find a name. The door closed behind him with a soft click, sealing him in with Alice and the promise of transformation, the city's hum fading into a distant echo as he began to see the possibility of becoming someone new, someone free. The yellow house was a sanctuary of soft light and hushed anticipation, the air infused with the faint scent of lavender and expectation. Alice led Ethan into a small rose-colored room, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected endless possibilities. The city's hum was a distant murmur outside, but inside the silence was electric, charged with the weight of what was about to unfold. Alice moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, her every gesture deliberate, her brown eyes holding a promise Ethan couldn't name, but desperately wanted to claim. "First things first," she said, her voice a smooth caress as she pulled a jar of cream from a drawer. Its sharp medicinal scent filled the room as she coated his arms, legs, and chest with efficient, confident strokes. Her fingers brushed his skin, sending shivers down his spine not from cold, but from the intimacy of the moment, the way her touch felt like a bridge to something he'd only dreamed of. "This will take care of the hair," she explained, her tone matter-of-fact but warm. "Trust me, Ethan. You're ready for this." He stood still, vulnerable yet exhilarated, as the cream worked its magic, the timer ticking like a heartbeat in the background. When it buzzed, she guided him to a bathroom, the tiles cool against his bare feet. Under the shower's spray, he watched his thin, coarse hair swirl down the drain, each strand a shedding of the old self. The soap she'd left fragrant with vanilla and rose slid over his now smooth skin, and he scrubbed with a fervor born of hope, shaving the faint stubble on his chin until his face felt soft, new. Back in the room, wrapped in a towel that clung to his damp skin, he found Alice waiting, her smile a beacon of encouragement. She'd changed into a pair of cut-off shorts and a fitted top, the fabric hugging her curves in a way that radiated femininity, her ponytail swinging with each step. Her breasts swayed subtly, a reminder of the transformation he craved, and he felt a flush of embarrassment as his body responded, but she ignored it, her focus unwavering. "Now, let's make you beautiful," she said, laying out items on the bed. White cotton panties still in their package, a delicate bra, a short white slip, and something he didn't recognize, a padded panty brief and a waist nipper. Tools of a craft he was, only beginning to understand. Her hands moved with a sensual precision as she coached him, her voice a whisper of silk. "Step into these," she instructed, handing him the panties. The fabric was cool and smooth against his skin, a stark contrast to the rough denim he was used to, and he shivered as he pulled them up. Alice guided him to a vanity, her reflection in the mirror a study in elegance as she opened jars of makeup. "Foundation first," she said, dabbing a creamy beige onto his face with 2 fingers. "Spread it evenly, hide the past, reveal the future." He mimicked her movements, the cool liquid smoothing over his skin, erasing the last traces of Ethan. Powder followed, a soft puff that left his face matte and flawless like hers. "Now the eyes," she murmured, her breath warm against his ear as she demonstrated with a brush, sweeping soft plum and light gray shadows across his lids. The black liquid eyeliner came next, its sharp line a frame for the new self he was becoming, and he managed it on the first try, his hand steady under her gaze. The bra was a revelation, its straps delicate against his shoulders as he fastened it, Alice slipping soft, flesh-colored forms into the cups. They gave him curves, a swell that made his breath catch as he looked down. The waist nipper cinched him tighter, a delicious pressure that reshaped his silhouette, and the pantyhose slid up his legs like a second skin, their slick nylon transforming his knobby knees into smooth, shapely lines. He shivered again, the sensation intoxicating, as Alice held out the slip. It slipped over his head, the lace trim brushing his thighs, a whisper of femininity that made his heart race. Then came the dress, red, short, and form-fitting, its fabric carrying the scent of new beginnings, crisp and alluring. Alice zipped it up, the material hugging his newly shaped body, the neckline dipping just enough to hint at the curves beneath. He felt the weight of the breast forms, their presence a thrilling secret as she placed a short brown wig on his head, pinning it with deft fingers. At the vanity again, he watched as she brushed on pale blusher, her touch light but electric, and handed him a tube of red lipstick. The waxy color glided on, hiding the small mole near his lip, and when he smiled, it was a smile he didn't recognize, confident, alluring. Alice pierced his ears with a quick, sharp sting, inserting small gold hoops that caught the light, then draped a thin gold chain around his neck, its cool weight a mark of his new identity. "Perfume here," she said, handing him a dauber, guiding his hand to his neck, elbows, and wrists. The scent, floral, seductive, with a hint of spice, lingered, a cloak of femininity that made him feel invincible. She handed him black heels, low but shiny, their click against the floor a sound of transformation. "Stand here," she said, leading him to the center of the room. In the mirror he saw not Ethan, but Emily, a girl with a magnetism he'd never noticed before, her eyes bright with possibility, her lips curved in a smile that promised secrets. The red dress clung to her, the hem teasing her thighs, the neckline framing a delicate collarbone. Her legs, now smooth and elegant in the heels, carried a grace he'd only dreamed of. Alice stepped back, her eyes gleaming with pride. "How will you name yourself?" she asked, her voice a velvet challenge. "Emily," he said, the name slipping out like a confession, soft and sure. It felt right, a completion of the journey that had started with a stolen moment in the Delta. Alice smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips that sealed his fate. In that moment, Emily knew there was no going back. The path was clear, and she wanted to be just like Alice, confident, magnetic, a woman who commanded the room with every breath. The air between them crackled, a silent promise of more transformations to come, and Emily stepped forward, ready to embrace the life she'd always longed for. The drive from Alice's yellow house to her boutique in the affluent part of Oklahoma City was a blur of city lights and nervous anticipation, the hum of the car engine a steady heartbeat beneath Emily's newfound skin. When they arrived, the boutique shimmered like a jewel in the evening glow, its pink and rose exterior a beacon of elegance amid the sleek glass towers. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of silk and perfume, racks of dresses in every color swaying gently under the soft overhead lights. Mannequins stood poised in formals and lingerie, their glassy eyes watching as Alice ushered Emily through the door. It was a world of luxury that both terrified and captivated her. The shimmer of sequins, the whisper of cashmere, the bottles of fragrance lined up like soldiers on a glass counter. Alice set her to work behind the register, her movements graceful as she explained the system. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she rang up a sale, the smooth plastic of the credit card machine cool under her fingers. The first customers glanced at her, their eyes lingering a moment too long, and a jolt of fear shot through her. Were they seeing through the makeup, the dress, the carefully crafted illusion? But as the hours passed, the fear began to ebb, replaced by a swell of pride. She stood tall in her red dress and black heels, the gold hoops at her ears catching the light, and felt the weight of their gazes transform into something else, recognition, admiration. She was part of something bigger now, a tapestry of beauty and confidence woven by Alice's steady hand. Days turned into weeks, and Emily settled into the rhythm of the boutique. She learned to fold silks without creasing them, to recommend perfumes that matched a client's aura, to smile with a poise that masked the storm inside. The city buzzed outside, but inside these walls, she was safe, growing into the woman she'd always dreamed of being. Her reflection in the mirrored walls no longer startled her. It was Emily staring back, her eyes bright with newfound purpose, her lips painted in shades of confidence. One evening, as the shop prepared to close, a tall figure lingered near the counter. His name was Jeff, a client with broad shoulders and a jawline that seemed carved from stone. His eyes, warm and hazel, locked onto hers, and his voice, deep and velvety, sent a shiver down her spine. "You're beautiful," he said, the words simple but charged with a sincerity that made her breath catch. The blood in her veins surged, a wildfire of sensation she'd never felt before. His gaze was a caress, tracing the lines of her face, the curve of her neck, the way the red dress hugged her newly shaped form. For the first time, someone saw her not as Ethan, not as a secret, but as a woman desirable, magnetic. The air between them thickened, electric with unspoken possibility. Jeff leaned closer, his cologne a mix of cedar and spice mingling with the boutique's floral scents, creating a heady cocktail that made her dizzy. His hand brushed the counter as he reached for his purchase, and the accidental touch of his fingers against hers was a spark, igniting a heat that pooled low in her stomach. She imagined his touch elsewhere on her cheek, her waist, the small of her back, each fantasy more intoxicating than the last. His voice lingered in her mind, a baritone promise of connection, and she felt the weight of her transformation shift, not just outward, but inward, toward a hunger she hadn't known she possessed. Alice watched from across the room, a knowing smile playing on her lips, but said nothing. The moment passed, Jeff leaving with a lingering look that promised more, and Emily stood there, heart racing, the taste of lipstick on her lips suddenly sweeter, the scent of her perfume more potent. She was no longer just playing a role. She was living it, feeling it, craving the validation that Jeff's words had ignited. The boutique, once a stage, now felt like a sanctuary where she could explore this new, exhilarating self, a woman who could draw eyes, inspire desire, and stand tall in the light of her own becoming. The car hummed softly as Alice navigated the winding roads back toward the Delta, the city lights of Oklahoma fading into the starlit expanse of Oklahoma City's outskirts. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her heart a drumbeat of anticipation and nerves, the green dress clinging to her newly shaped form like a second skin. Its sleeveless sheath hugged her waist, the square neckline framing the modest swell of her breast forms, now glued securely to her chest, while the gold hoops at her ears and the pendant necklace dangling between her collarbones caught the moonlight. Her makeup was impeccable soft plum eyeshadow, a touch of blush, and red lipstick that gave her lips a sensual curve. The scent of her perfume, a blend of jasmine and musk, lingered in the air, a reminder of the woman she'd become under Alice's guidance. When they pulled up beside Otis's house, the gravel crunching under the tires, Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening on the edge of her seat. The Delta stretched out before her, familiar yet foreign, its vastness now a mirror to the changes within her. Alice turned, her brown eyes warm but resolute. "You're ready," she said, her voice a steady anchor. "They need to see you, Emily. All of you." Emily stepped out, the black heels clicking softly against the ground, her legs long and trim in the pantyhose that smoothed her silhouette. The green dress swayed with each step, its hem brushing mid-thigh, a whisper of elegance against the rough terrain. She carried herself as Alice had taught her, chin up, shoulders back, hands folded gracefully in front. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth, but her skin tingled with the heat of expectation. Linda appeared on the porch first, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of the house lights. When she saw Emily, her breath caught, a soft gasp escaping her lips. "Lord, you're beautiful!" she exclaimed, her voice thick with awe and pride. She rushed down the steps, her arms enveloping Emily in a hug that felt like home, her warmth seeping through the thin fabric of the dress, grounding her in the love she'd always known. Behind Linda, Harry emerged, his white mane catching the starlight, his blue eyes crinkling with that familiar toothless grin. He stood still for a moment, taking her in from the gold earrings to the heels, from the confident set of her shoulders to the magnetic poise that Alice had instilled. Then he stepped forward, his arms opening wide, and Emily felt the tears prick at her eyes as she moved into his embrace. His voice, rough but tender, rumbled against her ear. "Feel as good as you look?" "Yes, Harry," she whispered, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her chest. "Now I know who I am." They pulled back, and Harry's gaze held hers, deep and searching. "You gotta become a woman like your mother was, like Linda is," he said, his words carrying the weight of a lifetime's wisdom. "Don't let pride stop you, girl. You keep pushing, keep shining, or you'll never find what you're meant for." Emily nodded, the ring on her finger Harry's gift, his late wife's wedding band gleaming in the dim light, a symbol of continuity and acceptance. She felt the truth of his words settle into her bones, a challenge and a blessing wrapped in one. Alice stepped forward, her presence a quiet force beside them. "She can't stay here," she said, her voice firm but gentle as she addressed Harry and Linda. "Emily has more to learn, and she needs to be in the city school, life, all of it. I want her to stay with me, finish this journey. We can have Ben change her name legally, get her the support she needs. Hormones, too, to help her body match her heart." Harry's jaw tightened, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but he nodded slowly, the lines of his face softening with resignation. "I know you're right, Alice. She's your responsibility now, but she'll always be mine." His eyes met Emily's, sparkling with a love that transcended words, and she felt the ache of leaving him, tempered by the thrill of what lay ahead. Linda squeezed Emily's hand, her smile radiant despite the tears in her eyes. "You go, honey. We'll be here always. This is your time." And so, under the Delta's endless sky, with the scent of pine and the promise of a new life swirling around her, Emily made her choice. The path forward was clear, lit by the love of those who saw her for who she truly was. Alice's hand on her shoulder was a vow, Harry's nod a farewell, and Linda's embrace a bridge between worlds. Together, they stepped back into the car, the engine purring to life as Emily left the Delta behind, ready to claim the future that awaited her in the city's embrace. Fall painted Oklahoma City in hues of gold and crimson, the crisp air carrying the scent of fallen leaves and possibility, as Emily stepped into her new life at school. The hallways buzzed with the energy of youth, lockers slamming, laughter echoing. But for Emily, each step was a victory, each glance a test. Her body was changing hormones, softening her skin to a velvet smoothness, rounding her hips, and budding breasts that no longer needed the forms she'd once relied on. She wore a simple sweater and skirt, the fabric brushing against her skin with a newfound sensitivity. Her hair now longer, styled in loose waves that framed her face. The gold hoops and pendant necklace from Alice gleamed at her throat, a talisman of her transformation, and her makeup subtle but striking gave her a confidence that shone like a beacon. Jeff, the tall, broad-shouldered boy from the boutique, had become a constant presence in her life. Their paths crossed more often now, his warm hazel eyes following her with a curiosity that made her pulse quicken. One afternoon, they met at a small cafe near the school, its windows fogged with the warmth of coffee and conversation. He slid into the booth across from her, his voice a rich baritone that sent shivers down her spine. "You look different today," he said, his gaze lingering on her lips, her eyes, the way her sweater clung to her curves. When his hand brushed hers as he reached for the sugar, the contact was electric, a jolt of heat that raced up her arm and settled deep in her core. She caught her breath, the scent of his cologne cedar and spice mingling with the coffee's bitterness, creating a heady mix that made her dizzy with desire. Weeks passed, and their connection deepened, a dance of glances and laughter that felt both forbidden and inevitable. By Christmas, Jeff invited her to his family's gathering, and there, under the glow of fairy lights and the scent of pine, he pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was his class ring, gold and heavy with meaning. "For you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes searching hers. Emily hesitated, the weight of the gesture crashing over her. What would Harry and Linda say? What would Alice think? But when she called them later, their voices were clear. "Put it on or he'll think you don't care," Linda urged, her laughter warm and knowing. Harry's gruff voice chimed in. "You deserve this, girl. Don't hide from it." So she wore the ring, its cool metal a promise against her skin. And that night, when Jeff walked her to Alice's door, the air was thick with anticipation. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, catching in his hair, and his breath fogged in the cold as he turned to face her. "Emily," he murmured, his voice a caress, and then he leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that stopped time. They were warm, soft yet firm, tasting of peppermint and something uniquely him, and the scent of his cologne enveloped her, opiating and intoxicating. Her knees weakened, and she pressed closer, feeling the heat of his body through his coat, the magnetic pull of his presence drawing her in. His hands settled on her waist, tentative but sure, and she melted into him, the world narrowing to the press of his mouth, the rhythm of their breath sinking in a dance as old as desire itself. In that moment, Emily understood. She loved being a girl, not just for the dresses, the makeup, the transformation Alice had guided her through, but for this, the thrill of being seen, desired, cherished by someone who didn't know her past but adored her present. The kiss ended, but its echo lingered, a promise of more, a validation that she was no longer just surviving. She was thriving, a woman in the world's eyes, magnetic and alive. Jeff pulled back, his eyes dark with longing, and she knew this was only the beginning, a chapter in a story where love and identity intertwined, as dazzling and dangerous as the city lights behind them. A year had passed since that snowy Christmas kiss, and Emily stood at the precipice of a new chapter, the Oklahoma City skyline glittering behind her like a promise kept. She'd graduated at the top of her class, her report card a testament to the discipline Alice had instilled and the resilience Harry and Linda had nurtured. Her body had softened further with hormones, her skin now a smooth canvas of femininity, her curves natural and confident in the tailored blazer and skirt she wore for the ceremony. The gold ring from Harry his late wife's still gleamed on her finger, a tether to her roots, while the pendant necklace and earrings Alice had chosen added a touch of elegance that made her feel invincible. Her hair, now longer and styled with care, framed her face in waves that caught the light, and her makeup subtle but striking highlighted eyes that sparkled with determination. The graduation party was held at Alice's house, the yellow walls aglow with warmth and laughter. Harry, his white mane still regal, sat in a corner, his toothless grin wide as he watched her move through the room. Marcus, lean and steady, raised a glass in her honor, his deep brown eyes reflecting pride. Linda, ever the matriarch, hugged her tightly, her voice soft but firm. Pride and prejudice, they're your enemies, child. Live the way your heart tells you. The words sank in, a mantra she'd carry forward, a reminder of the love that had carried her through. Jeff was there too, but their romance had faded by spring, a gentle parting that left them both grateful. He'd been her first taste of love, his kisses a thrill that had validated her femininity, but they'd grown apart, their paths diverging. Now he was just a friend, his warm hazel eyes still kind but no longer charged with the electric pull of desire. It was for the best. Emily knew her heart was set on bigger dreams, and his on a different future. They shared a quiet smile across the room, a nod to what had been, and she felt no regret, only gratitude. Alice stood beside her, a sister and mentor rolled into one, her elegance undimmed. "You're ready for college," she said, her voice a velvet reassurance. "You've got the poise, the strength, the heart. Whatever comes next, you'll shine." Emily nodded, her throat tight with emotion. The room buzzed with the voices of those who'd believed in her. Harry, Marcus, Linda, Alice, even Mike and Ben, who'd come to celebrate. They were her family, bound not by blood, but by a love that transcended labels, a love that had seen her through the darkest doubts to this moment of triumph. As the night wore on, she stepped outside onto the porch, the cool night air brushing her skin like a lover's touch. The Delta was far away, but its lessons lingered: the freedom of the birds soaring on thermals, the solitude that had birthed her dreams. She looked out at the stars, their light a mirror to the clarity she'd found within. Life wasn't always simple, she knew that now. There were challenges ahead: college, careers, a world that might not always understand. But fear had no hold on her anymore. She'd faced the abyss, leapt, and landed safely on the other side, her identity no longer a question, but a truth. She was Emily not because of the dresses, the makeup, or the heels, but because of the soul that had always known who she was meant to be. The journey had been hers alone, but the love of those around her had lit the way, a constellation of support that guided her forward. She took a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from her perfume mingling with the night's freshness, and stepped back inside, ready to embrace whatever came next. The path was hers, and she would walk it with the grace, strength, and magnetism she'd fought so hard to claim.